Hello and welcome to Public Domain Dad, where I read a story from the public domain like I read to my kids. I'm your host, CJ. Today we will be continuing the story, The Voyages of Dr. Dolittle. Before we begin, I want to issue a small warning. While reading ahead for today's episode, I noticed that there are some racial slurs and other issues in the chapter ahead. I have made the decision to exclude that from this. So if you're reading along, just be aware. The fifth chapter, Polynesia. I think your house is the most interesting house I was ever in, I said as we set off in the direction of the town. May I come and see you again tomorrow? Certainly, said the doctor. Come any day you like. Tomorrow I'll show you the garden and my private zoo. Oh, you have a zoo? I asked. Yes, said he. The larger animals are too big for the house, so I keep them in a zoo in the garden. It's not a very big collection, but it is very interesting in its way. It must be splendid, I said, to be able to talk all the languages of the different animals. Do you think I could ever learn to do it? Oh, surely, said the doctor, with practice. You have to be very patient, you know. You really ought to have Polynesia to start you. It was she who gave me my first lessons. Who's Polynesia? I asked. Polynesia was a West African parrot I had. She isn't with me any more now, said the doctor sadly. Why? Is she dead? Oh, no, said the doctor. She's still living, I hope. But when we reached Africa, she seemed to be so glad to get back to her own country. She wept for joy. And when the time came for me to come back here, I had not the heart to take her away from that sunny land. Although it is true she did offer to come, I left her in Africa. Well, I have missed her terribly. She wept again when we left, but I think I did the right thing. She was one of the best friends I ever had. It was she who first gave me the idea of learning the animal languages and becoming an animal doctor. I often wonder if she remained happy in Africa and whether I shall ever see her funny, old, solemn face again. Good old Polynesia, a most extraordinary bird. Well, well. Just at that moment, we heard the noise of someone running up behind us. And turning around, we saw Jip the dog rushing down the road after us as fast as his legs could bring him. He seemed to be very excited about something, and as soon as he came up to us, he started barking and whining to the doctor in a peculiar way. Then the doctor seemed to get all worked up and began talking and making queer signs to the dog. At length he turned to me, his face shining with happiness. Polynesia has come back, he cried. Imagine it. Jip says she has just arrived at the house. My! And it's 5 years since I saw her. Excuse me a minute. He turned as if to go back home, but the parrot, Polynesia, was already flying towards us. The doctor clapped his hands like a child getting a new toy, while the swarm of sparrows in the roadway fluttered, gossiping up on the fences, highly scandalized to see a gray and scarlet parrot skimming down an English lane. On she came, straight to the doctor's shoulder, where she immediately began talking in a steady stream of language I could not understand. She seemed to have a terrible lot to say, and very soon the doctor had forgotten all about me and my squirrel and Jip and everything else, till at length the bird clearly asked him something about me. Oh, excuse me, Stubbins, said the doctor. I was so interested listening to my old friend here. We must get on and see this squirrel of yours. Polynesia, this is Thomas Stubbins. The parrot on the doctor's shoulder nodded gravely towards me, and then, to my great surprise, said quite plainly in English, How do you do? I remember the night you were born. It was a terribly cold winter. You were a very ugly baby. Stubbins is anxious to learn the animal language, said the doctor. I was just telling him about you and the lessons you gave me when Jip ran up and told us you had arrived. Well, said the parrot, turning to me, I may have started the doctor learning, but I never could have done even that if he hadn't first taught me to understand what I was saying when I spoke English. You see, many parrots can talk like a person, but very few of them understand what they are saying. They just say it because they fancy it is smart, or because they know it will get crackers given to them. By this time, we had turned and were going towards my home, with Jip running in front and Polynesia still perched on the doctor's shoulder. The bird chattered incessantly, mostly about Africa, but now she spoke English, out of politeness to me. "How is Prince Bumpo getting on?" asked the doctor. "Oh, I'm glad you asked me," said Polynesia. "I almost forgot to tell you. What do you think? Bumpo is in England." "In England, you don't say," cried the doctor. "What on earth is he doing here?" "His father, the king, sent him to a place called, Bulford, I think it was, to study lessons." "Bulford, Bulford," muttered the doctor. "I have never heard of the place." "Oh, you mean Oxford." "Yes, that's the place, Oxford," said Polynesia. "I knew it had cattle in it somewhere. Oxford, that's the place he's gone to." "Well, well," murmured the doctor. "Fancy Bumpo studying at Oxford. Well, well." They were doing great things in Jolliginki when he left. I was scared to death to come. He was the first man from that country to go abroad. He thought he was going to get eaten by white cannibals or something. But his father made him come. He said that all the black kings were sending their sons to Oxford now. It was the fashion, and he would have to go. Bumpo wanted to bring his 6 wives with him, but the king wouldn't let him do that either. Poor Bumpo went off in tears, and everybody in the palace was crying too. You never heard such a hullabaloo. "Do you know if he ever went back in search of the Sleeping Beauty?" asked the doctor. "Oh, yes," said Polynesia, "the day after you left. And a good thing for him that he did. The king got to know about his helping you escape, and he was dreadfully wild about it." "And the Sleeping Beauty? Did he ever find her?" "Well, he brought back something which he said was the Sleeping Beauty. She had red hair and the biggest feet you ever saw. But Bumpo was no end pleased with her and finally married her among great rejoicings. The feastings lasted 7 days. She became his chief wife and is now known out there as the Crown Princess Bumpa. You accent the last syllable. "And how is Chi-Chi getting on?" "Chi-Chi," added the doctor in explanation to me, "was a pet monkey I had years ago. I left him too in Africa when I came away." "Well," said Polynesia, frowning, "Chi-Chi is not entirely happy. I saw a good deal of him the last few years. He got dreadfully homesick for you in the house and the garden. It's funny, but I was just the same way myself. You remember how crazy I was to get back to the dear old land? And Africa is a wonderful country. I don't care what anybody says. Well, I thought I was going to have a perfectly grand time, but somehow, I don't know, after a few weeks it seemed to get tiresome. I just couldn't seem to settle down. Well, to make a long story short, one night I made up my mind that I'd come back here and find you. So I hunted up old Chi-Chi and told him about it. He said he didn't blame me a bit, felt exactly the same way himself. Africa was so deadly quiet after the life we had led with you. He missed the stories you used to tell us out of your animal books and the chats we used to have sitting around the kitchen fire on winter nights. The animals out there were very nice to us and all that, but somehow the dear kind creatures seemed a bit stupid. Chi-Chi said he had noticed it too, but I suppose it wasn't they who had changed. It was we who were different. When I left, poor old Chi-Chi broke down and cried. He said he felt as though his only friend were leaving him. Though, as you know, he has simply millions of relatives there. He said it didn't seem fair that I should have wings to fly over here any time I liked, and him with no way to follow me. But, mark my words, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if he found a way to come, someday. He's a smart lad, is Chi-Chi. At this point, we arrived at my home. My father's shop was closed and the shutters were up, but my mother was standing in the door looking down the street. "Good evening, Mrs. Stubbins," said the doctor. "It is my fault your son is so late." I made him stay to supper while his clothes were drying. He was soaked to the skin, and so was I. We ran into one another in the storm, and I insisted on his coming to my house for shelter. "I was beginning to get worried about him," said my mother. "I'm thankful to you, sir, for looking after him so well and bringing him home." Don't mention it," said the doctor. "We have had a very interesting chat." "Who might it be that I have the honor of addressing?" asked my mother, staring at the gray parrot perched on the doctor's shoulder. "Oh, I'm John Dolittle. I dare say your husband will remember me. He made me some very excellent boots about 4 years ago. They really are splendid," added the doctor, gazing down at his feet with great satisfaction. "The doctor has come to cure my squirrel, Mother," said I. "He knows all about animals." "Oh, no," said the doctor. "Not all, Stubbins. Not all about them by any means." "It's very kind of you to come so far to look after his pet," said my mother. "Tom is always bringing home strange creatures from the woods and the fields." "Is he?" said the doctor. "Perhaps he will grow up to be a naturalist some day. Who knows?" "Won't you come in?" asked my mother. "The place is a little untidy because I haven't finished the spring cleaning yet, but there's a nice fire burning in the parlor." "Thank you," said the doctor. "What a charming home you have." And after wiping his enormous boots very, very carefully on the mat, the great man passed into the house. The 6th chapter, The Wounded Squirrel. Inside, we found my father busy practicing on the flute beside the fire. This he always did, every evening after his work was over. The doctor immediately began talking to him about flutes and piccolos and bassoons, and presently my father said, "Perhaps you perform on the flute yourself, sir. Won't you play us a tune?" "Well," said the doctor, "it's a long time since I touched the instrument, but I would like to try. May I?" Then the doctor took the flute from my father and played and played and played. It was wonderful. My mother and father sat still as statues, staring up at the ceiling as though they were in church, and even I, who didn't bother much about music except on the mouth organ, even I felt all sad and cold and creepy and wished I had been a better boy. "Oh, I think that's just beautiful," sighed my mother when at length the doctor stopped. "You are a great musician, sir," said my father. "A very great musician. Won't you please play us something else?" "Why, certainly," said the doctor. "Oh, but look here. I've forgotten all about the squirrel." "I'll show him to you," I said. "He's upstairs in my room." So I led the doctor to my bedroom at the top of the house and showed him the squirrel in a packing case filled with straw. The animal, who had always seemed very much afraid of me, though I had tried hard to make him feel at home, sat up at once when the doctor came into the room and started to chatter. The doctor chattered back in the same way, and the squirrel, when he was lifted up to have his leg examined, appeared to be rather pleased than frightened. I held a candle while the doctor had tied up the leg in what he called splints, which he made out of matchsticks with his penknife. "I think you will find that his leg will get better now in a very short time," said the doctor, closing up his bag. "Don't let him run about for at least 2 weeks yet, but keep him in the open air and cover him up with dry leaves if the nights get cool. He tells me he is rather lonely here, all by himself, and is wondering how his wife and children are getting on. I have assured him you are a man to be trusted, and will send a squirrel who lives in my garden to find out how his family are and bring them the news of him. He must be kept cheerful at all costs. Squirrels are naturally a very cheerful, active race. It's very hard for them to lie still doing nothing, but you needn't worry about him. He will be all right." Then we went back again to the parlor, and my mother and father kept him playing the flute till after 10 o'clock. Although my parents both liked the doctor tremendously from the first moment they saw him, they were very proud to have him come and play to us, for we were really terribly poor. They did not realize then what a truly great man he would one day become. Of course now, when almost everybody in the world has heard about Dr. Dolittle and his books, if you were to go to that little house in Puddleby where my father had his cobbler's shop, you would see, set in the wall over the old-fashioned door, a stone with writing on it which says, "John Dolittle, the famous naturalist, played the flute in this house in the year 1839. I often look back upon that night long ago, and if I close my eyes and think hard, I can see the parlor just as it was then. A funny little man in coat-tails with a round, kind face, playing away on the flute in front of the fire. My mother on one side of him and my father on the other, holding their breath and listening with their eyes shut. Myself, with Jip, squatting on the carpet at his feet, staring into the coals. And Polynesia perched on the mantelpiece beside his shabby high hat, gravely swinging her head from side to side in time to the music. I see it all, just as though it were before me now. And when I remember how, after we had seen the doctor out the front door, We all came back into the parlor and talked about him until it was still later. And even after I did go to bed, I had never stayed up so late in my life before. I dreamed about him and a band of strange, clever animals that played flutes and fiddles and drums the whole night through. The 7th chapter, Shellfish Talk. The next morning, although I had gone to bed so late the night before, I was up frightfully early. The first sparrows were just beginning to chirp sleepily on the slates outside my attic window when I jumped out of bed and scrambled into my clothes. I could hardly wait to get back to the little house with the big garden, to see the doctor and his private zoo. For the first time in my life, I forgot all about breakfast, and creeping down the stairs on tiptoe so as not to wake my mother and father, I opened the front door and popped out into the empty, silent street. When I got to the doctor's gate, I suddenly thought that perhaps it was too early to call on anyone, and I began to wonder if the doctor would be up yet. I looked into the garden. No one seemed to be about, so I opened the gate quietly and went inside. As I turned to the left to go down a path between some hedges, I heard a voice quite close to me say, "Good morning. How early you are." I turned around, and sitting there on top of a privet hedge was the gray parrot Polynesia. "Good morning," I said. "I suppose I am rather early. Is the doctor still in bed?" "Oh, no," said Polynesia. "He's been up an hour and a half. You'll find him in the house somewhere. The front door is open. Just push it and go right in. He's sure to be in the kitchen cooking breakfast or working in his study. Walk right in. I'm waiting to see the sun rise. But upon my word, I believe it's forgotten to rise. It's an awful climate, this. Now, if we were in Africa, the world would be blazing with sunlight at this hour of the morning. Just see that mist rolling over these cabbages. It's enough to give you rheumatism to look at. Beastly climate. Beastly. Really, I don't know why anything but frogs ever stay in England. Well, don't let me keep you. Run along and see the doctor." "Thank you," I said. "I'll go and look for him." When I opened the front door, I could smell bacon frying, so I made my way to the kitchen. There I discovered a large kettle boiling away over the fire and some bacon and eggs in a dish upon the hearth. It seemed to me that the bacon was getting all dried up with the heat, so I pulled the dish a little further away from the fire and went through the house looking for the doctor. I found him at last in the study. I did not know then that it was called the study. It was certainly a very interesting room, with telescopes and microscopes and all sorts of other strange things which I did not understand but wished I did. Hanging on the walls were pictures of animals and fishes and strange plants and a collection of birds' eggs and seashells in glass cases. The doctor was standing at the main table in his dressing gown. At first I thought he was washing his face. He had a square glass box before him full of water. He was holding one ear under the water, while he covered the other with his left hand. As I came in, he stood up. "Good morning, Stubbins," said he. "Going to be a nice day, don't you think? I've just been listening to the whiff-waff, but he is very disappointing. Very." "Why?" I said. "Didn't you find that he has any language at all?" "Oh, yes," said the doctor. "He has a language, but it's such a poor language. Only a few words like yes and no, hot and cold. That's all he can say. It's very disappointing. You see, he really belongs to 2 different families of fishes, though I thought he was going to be tremendously helpful. Well, I suppose," said I, "that means he hasn't very much sense, if his language is only 2 or 3 words." "Yes, I suppose it does. Possibly is the kind of life he leads. You see, they are very rare now, these whiff-waffs, very rare and very solitary. They swim around in the deepest parts of the ocean entirely by themselves, always alone. So I presume they don't really need to talk much." "Perhaps some kind of bigger shellfish would talk more," I said. "After all, he's very small, isn't he?" "Yes," said the doctor, "that's true." "Oh, I have no doubt that there are shellfish who are good talkers, not the least doubt. But the big shellfish, the biggest of them, are so hard to catch. They are only to be found in the deep parts of the sea, and they don't swim very much, but just crawl along the floor of the ocean most of the time. They are very seldom taken in nets. I do wish I could find some way of going down to the bottom of the sea. I could learn a lot if I could only do that. But we are forgetting all about breakfast, Have you had breakfast yet, Stubbins? I told the doctor that I had forgotten all about it, and he at once led the way into the kitchen. Yes, he said as he poured hot water from the kettle into the teapot. If a man could only manage to get right down to the bottom of the sea and live there a while, he would discover some wonderful things that people have never dreamed of. But men go down, don't they? I asked. Divers and people like that? Oh, yes, to be sure, said the doctor. Divers go down. I've been down myself in a diving suit for that matter. But they only go to where the sea is shallow. Divers can't go down where it's really deep. What I would like to do is go down to the great depths, where it is miles deep. Well, I dare say I shall manage it some day. Let me give you another cup of tea. The 8th chapter. Are you a good noticer? Just at that moment, Polynesia came into the room and said something to the doctor in bird language. Of course, I did not understand what it was, but the doctor at once put down his knife and fork and left the room. You know, it's an awful shame, said the parrot as soon as the doctor had closed the door. Directly he comes back home, all the animals over the whole countryside get to hear of it, and every sick cat and mangy rabbit for miles around comes to see him and ask his advice. Now there's a big fat hare outside the back door with a squawking baby. Can't she see the doctor, please? Thinks it's going to have convulsions. Stupid little thing's been eating deadly nightshade again, I suppose. The animals are so inconsiderate at times, especially the mothers. They come around and call the doctor away from his meals and wake him out of his bed at all hours of the night. I don't know how he stands it. I really don't. Why, the poor man never gets any peace at all. I've told him time and again to have special hours for the animals to come, but he's so frightfully kind and considerate. He never refuses to see them if there is really anything wrong with them. He says urgent cases must be seen at once. Why don't some of the animals go and see the other doctors? I asked. Oh, good gracious, exclaimed the parrot, tossing her head scornfully. Why, there aren't any other animal doctors. Not real doctors. Oh, of course there are those vet persons, to be sure. But, bless you, they're no good. You see, they can't understand an animal's language, so how can you expect them to be of any use? Imagine yourself or your father going to see a doctor who could not understand a word you say, nor even tell you in your own language what you must do to get well. Those vets. They're that stupid you have no idea. Put the doctor's bacon down by the fire, will you, to keep it hot till he comes back. Do you think I would ever be able to learn the language of the animals? I asked, laying the plate upon the hearth. Well, it depends, said Polynesia. Are you clever at lessons? I don't know, I answered, feeling rather ashamed. You see, I've never been to school. My father is too poor to send me. Well, said the parrot, I don't suppose you have really missed much, to judge from what I have seen of schoolboys. But listen, are you a good noticer? Do you notice things well? I mean, for instance, supposing you saw 2 cock starlings on an apple tree, and you only took one good look at them. Would you be able to tell one from another if you saw them again the next day? I don't know, I said. I've never tried. Well, that, said Polynesia, brushing some crumbs from the corner of the table with her left foot, that is what you call the powers of observation, noticing the small things about birds and animals, the way they walk and move their heads and flip their wings, the way they sniff at the air and twitch their whiskers and wiggle their tails. You have to notice all these little things if you want to learn the animal language. For you see, lots of the animals hardly talk at all with their tongues. They use their breath or their tails or their feet instead. That is because many of them, in the olden days when lions and tigers were more plentiful, were afraid to make noise for the fear of savage creatures hearing them. Birds, of course, didn't care, for they always have had wings to fly away with. But that is the first thing to remember. Being a good noticer is terribly important in learning animal language. It sounds pretty hard, I said. You'll have to be very patient, said Polynesia. It takes a long time to say even a few words properly. But if you come here often, I'll give you a few lessons myself. And once you get started, you'll be surprised how fast you get on. It would indeed be a good thing if you could learn, because then you could do some of the work for the doctor. I mean the easier work, like bandaging and giving pills. Yes, that's a good idea of mine. 'Twould be a great thing if the poor man could get some help and some rest. It is a scandal the way he works. I see no reason why you shouldn't be able to help him a great deal. That is, if you are really interested in animals. Oh, I'd love that, I cried. Do you think the doctor would let me? Certainly, said Polynesia. As soon as you've learned something about doctoring, I'll speak of it to him myself. Shh, I hear him coming. Quick, bring his bacon back to the table. And that is the end of the chapter and the end of the episode. Thank you for joining me.